Welcome to Not Another PD, the podcast for helping professionals who are over dull trainings and death by slideshow workshops. I'm Jasmine Purcell, social worker, coach, supervisor, and self-proclaimed boundaries queen. Each week, you'll hear real, honest conversations, sometimes solo, sometimes with expert guests. Think insider perspectives, practical takeaways, and a focus on your well-being, not just how you show up for clients. This podcast is about you, the human behind the caseload, the human behind the profession. So, what are we waiting for? Let's get started. Episode 3. Welcome back to Not Another PD. In episode 2, we talked about survive boundaries, which are those bare minimum foundational boundaries that help you get through the workday. If you haven't listened to that episode yet, you can just go back to that one because that's the episode in which I introduce you all to my signature boundaries pyramid, which are the 3 components are survive, sustain, and thrive. And I'll put the link in the show notes for you for episode 2 as well, if you haven't already listened to that one. But welcome back. I'm so much looking forward to talking about the second element or the next element in the boundaries pyramid. So we're moving it up a level now to sustain. These are the boundaries that ideally prevent burnout, and these are the steps that we can continue to take to try and minimize the likelihood of experiencing burnout. So once we have our foundational, our very basic core boundaries in survive, under control, then we're stepping it up now to sustain. So we're moving it up a level now. These are the boundaries that we put in place to continuously try to reduce the likelihood that we may experience burnout in our roles. When I started to have more of an online presence, in particular on LinkedIn, I started sharing some of my ideas around career development for helping professionals and the importance of LinkedIn in professional networking. I started sharing some of my thoughts around the importance of having good quality supervision as helping professionals and some of my own values, particularly around boundaries and other topics like this. I started to be more visible online. And of course, my desire was to be helpful to other professionals and to really draw attention to some of these concepts that maybe others didn't always talk about or that we shied away from talking about among colleagues or with our friends or even in our organizations. And because of my desire to be helpful and put some content out there, and I still put quite a lot of content on LinkedIn and Instagram, so I was sort of acting from a place of wanting to serve and support the community of helping professionals. And then what happened was every time I posted something, I would have at least several people make contact with me through the DMs and asking questions or advice relating to their specific circumstances. So I had quite a lot of new graduates, so particularly new graduate social workers reaching out to me, asking for specific advice around how they can secure a job, and that they would let me know all of their difficulties that they had had up until that point in obtaining their first graduate position. And certainly, and it also probably goes back to that I had experience in supporting the career development of both social work students in particular, but also new and early career practitioners and sort of graduates. I had quite a lot of experience in that space. So naturally, a lot of recent graduates would reach out to me, letting me know of all the difficulties they had in gaining their first professional role as a social worker. Initially, it started off with them just asking me a few questions, and I always like to be as approachable as I can. And, I'm a helper. I guess I studied social work because of my desire to help others. And I like to make information as readily available and accessible as possible to other helping professionals, especially early career practitioners. I have a real soft spot for supporting early career practitioners. And so initially it started off with these early career practitioners reaching out to me, letting me know of their unique challenges, those specific challenges they were having, and asked me several questions. So it was definitely not an issue. While it was the first contact with them, I introduced myself, I would answer their questions, and then it ended up being back and forth. I'd spend hours, and every time they responded, it would be, between 4 to 6 follow-up questions, and really specific follow-up questions that were very niched, it required very in-depth consideration before I responded, and then it needed even more consideration in how I responded to them. So this took hours and hours of time. And if it was just one person every now and again, that wouldn't necessarily be an issue. But because it was quite a few people and regularly, I ended up spending so much time in the DMs supporting people. But then I actually realized, how can I support these professionals without actually burning myself out in my inbox, really? And the thing is, in supporting them through DMs, I wasn't able to actually get to know their situation in greater detail. I wasn't able to actually get to know them and find out from them what some of their unique barriers, and we all do have barriers sometimes that can delay us in reach some of our career goals, whether it's getting your first graduate position. There's definitely barriers that we may all experience. And without me knowing much about their situation and some of those barriers, it was a bit hard to capture through the DMs. So the first thing was that I was at risk of burning out myself from over-delivering and over-servicing these my fellow practitioners through the DMs. But also, I was concerned that I wasn't able to provide them the level of in-depth responses and support that they actually needed. And they really needed specific advice or guidance around their unique situation. So that was, I guess, a wake-up call for me. So now when people reach out to me through the DMs, I'll still always respond. I'll always try to support with some of those initial questions that they may have. And I always think it's important to let people know if I think I'm able to support them. And now if someone reaches out to me in the DMs, I'll firstly consider, am I the right person to support them? And sometimes I'll have potential supervisees reach out to me and actually ask, they would like a supervisor with specific knowledge in certain areas. And if I don't possess those particular skill set that they're seeking, then I will quickly recommend another colleague who's an equally amazing supervisor to sort of meet their needs. So I'll firstly always reflect on, am I the best person to support you? And then if I am, then I can actually redirect them to some resources. So I have some information sheets around supervision with me, around coaching with me, any free resources that I have that may be beneficial for them. Or I may also mention to them some upcoming group supervision or group coaching that I have. That way, they're still getting support and I'm still responding to them. I'm still, being really polite and professional, but I'm not then giving away hours and hours of what's largely unpaid supervision or coaching through the DMs. And then I'm actually able to, if they decide to work with me, I'm able to support them in a more individual or group basis. So this is a classic example of sustained boundaries. It's about so you can be generous of your time, but also sustainable. So it certainly wasn't sustainable, and it certainly wasn't sustainable for me to spend hours in the DMs just for one person to answer their in-depth questions and their scenarios. And it also meant that the time and energy I was spending doing that, I wasn't able to spend time creating other resources or creating programs or actually supporting my existing clients. So what do I mean when I say sustain boundaries? So sustain is the middle layer of the boundaries pyramid. And this is my signature boundaries pyramid that I embed in everything that I do, both as a professional, as a human, but also as a leader. And it's not about just surviving your workday anymore. We're moving beyond that now, everyone. It's about creating some of these rhythms that actually protect your energy every week, every month, sort of ongoing. So some other examples of sustained boundaries. So I provided a bit of a case study of what that looked like for me and what I needed to do to actually sustain these boundaries. So some examples are that you may redirect questions to certain resources instead of answering everything one-to-one. So if you're a helping professional who supervises staff, or you may have your own business and you're providing clinical supervision, or perhaps you're a counsellor, you may find it helpful to redirect questions to resources. So you may have a frequently asked questions document. You may have a short introduction video to yourself. I have both of these things. You may have some of these resources which allow you to answer the majority of the questions that someone may have who's contacting you individually, but you're able to preserve some of your time in the process, and then your time can be spent elsewhere. Another example, which is a huge one, is actually protecting your weekends and evenings from work, but even from work talk. So if you're someone who has an amazing connection with your work colleagues and you might see them socially, so you might go out for Friday afternoon drinks, you may be invited to someone's bridal shower or birthday outside of work, sometimes because we have really similar shared experience of the work that we do, we can engage in, like shop talk outside of work hours. And it may seem quite harmless, but then if you think about it, your work day is over, your work week is over. And why do we continuously talk about work when we're not there anymore? It continues to sort of infiltrate our thoughts. And that could be an example of sustained boundaries for you, that when you're at any events, whether it's with your colleagues from work or whether it's with your friends or family who may work in a similar helping profession to you, or they may not, to actually consciously choose other topics to talk about. Without sustained boundaries, then burnout can creep into our lives, essentially. And we don't always notice these things at first, but over time, if you don't have these boundaries in place and don't work hard to sustain them and really maintain them, you soon become depleted and then utterly exhausted. And then what is the cost of that exhaustion on your own well-being, on the work that you're able to do with your clients, and also your interaction with your loved ones? I know times that I've been absolutely exhausted. I've not been fun to be around. Just ask my husband, just ask my daughters. When I'm particularly exhausted, I'm most unpleasant, and then it starts to then impact everyone's life. And I'm sure you'll agree with me that that's not what any of us want. We want careers that are sustainable. We want boundaries that are sustainable. And sometimes we need to be just firmer with our boundaries to try and reduce the risk that our work does start to flow heavily into our personal life. So you might be wondering, what's the main difference between the bottom layer of the pyramid, survive, and the middle part of the pyramid, sustain, which is what we're talking about now. So survive boundaries are really just about making it through the day. So it's, do you have the bare minimum boundaries just to get by the day without, collapsing into a heap at 5 p.m. Sustain boundaries, we are taking it that step further. It's about making it through the year. Can you sustain yourself in your helping profession at least for the year without, collapsing into a heap? At the next level, which is thrive, which we'll cover in the next episode, is actually about embedding boundaries so deeply that you're modeling and capacity building for other people. So whether it's your staff, your colleagues, even your friends and family. I know I regularly have conversations with my friends and family who, they're not social workers like me. Some of them are teachers, some of them are youth workers or counsellors. And I regularly have these conversations with others. And I'm sure if you ask them, they might say, oh, boundaries again, jazz and boundaries, like I'm tired of it. But I don't think we can ever talk about it too much because it's something we all struggle with at some point in time. You may not currently be struggling with it, but if you put yourself in a different situation, whether it's a new workplace, whether you've retrained in a different profession, whether you're feeling particularly vulnerable because maybe you've got some, some personal issues happening, so it can cause you to be a little bit more lax with your boundaries. So it just takes a situation or a situational change, and boundaries can quickly become eroded, which is where you had clear boundaries in place, but then they've been eroded. So then you either haven't maintained those boundaries, or others are actually crossing your boundaries and you're not doing anything to stay on track with your boundaries. And I love a good practical tool. So I'm going to give you all an example of a sustain level script that you can use if someone's asking for more than you are able to give. And this is an example of scripting that I could use in LinkedIn if I'm getting 4 to 5 questions every time I respond. Then this is an example of script I could use, and you can definitely tweak this to your needs. So here's an example of a script. Thank you so much for reaching out. It's great to connect with you. It sounds like what you're raising would be best supported through a supervision or coaching session where we'd have the space to work through it properly. Here's my info sheet / upcoming group / free resource so you can see the options for support. And then you can, close it with relevant pleasantries, etc. But see how that works. You're still being warm and professional, but you're redirecting the conversation into a more sustainable channel. And here's a reflection for all of you just to think about. Where in your work life or your personal life are you giving away hours through small repeated yeses? And how could you replace those with a kind redirect, or if it's in a professional setting, a resource? And here's a micro challenge for you all. I'd love it if you would give it a go and see if it lands with you. If you could practice one sustain level boundary, it could be redirecting someone to a resource instead of writing a long reply. It could be protecting your weekends from any work-related emails, or perhaps saying no to a request that really doesn't fit within your role. Just pick one, try it, and notice how it feels. And if you'd like to explore this further, I'm running a 2-part boundaries workshop series just for helping professionals. You can join these live or catch the replay. These workshops are designed to be practical, interactive, and you'll leave with scripts and strategies you can actually put into action straight away. And if you're listening to this episode after the live sessions, then you'll still be able to purchase the recording. So either way, I'll put the link to these workshops in the show notes. It'd be great to see you there live or catch the replay. Either myself or someone who is attending will actually present a case study and will unpack boundaries further using practical examples. So it's not just about teaching you theories on boundaries. Theories are great, but how do we actually enact theory? And that's what our evidence-based professions teach us. It's amazing to learn the theory, and we learn the theory in university, but it's through the clinical placement that we actually learn how to embed the theory into practice. So that's what I'm all about is, yes, there's always theory to it, but then how do we take the theory and actually apply it to our work and apply it to our lives? So that's all for this episode. Thank you so much for joining me. In this episode, we moved into the second part of my signature boundaries pyramid, which is sustained boundaries. We looked at a script you can use. We looked at an example in my practice in which sustained boundaries were very much needed and how I went about implementing that. Thank you so much for listening to Not Another PD. If today's episode resonated with you, share it with a colleague who could use stronger boundaries, less burnout, and more balance. And don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, keep saying yes less.